She sat across from her manager, hands flat on the table, as the words landed like small, cold stones. The feedback was measured, specific, and delivered in a tone of professional concern. Yet something inside her chest tightened immediately. A flash of hot anger rose toward her throat, but almost at the same instant, she smiled. The smile was a careful, practiced response that said nothing was wrong, that she received the critique with calm maturity. 12 hours later, standing in her kitchen, she snapped at her partner over a misplaced cup with a fury that startled them both. The easiest explanation is that she just needs better self-control, that she should have kept her cool at home too. But calling it a loss of control misses a deeper pattern, one that psychological research has been examining for decades. What she did in that meeting was not emotional regulation. It was emotional suppression, and those two processes operate in very different ways. Suppression means pushing a feeling out of awareness, trying to keep it invisible to others and to yourself. Regulation, by contrast, involves noticing a feeling, understanding it, and deciding how to respond without being overtaken by it. The problem with suppression appears immediately when you try to do it with a simple thought. In a well-known experiment, people were asked to spend a few minutes speaking freely, with one instruction: do not think about a white bear. They could not do it. The forbidden thought kept intruding again and again. And when the instruction was removed, their minds flooded with the very thought they had been trying to block. The act of pushing a feeling away requires you to constantly monitor whether it is still there. That monitoring keeps the feeling mentally alive, even while you are trying to ignore it. Our smiling listener in the meeting was not just hiding her anger from the outside world. She was also trying to hide it from herself, telling herself silently that she was fine, that it did not bother her. But just like the white bear, the anger did not disappear. It was simply held under pressure. Emotion researchers have found that people who habitually suppress strong feelings actually experience more intense emotional reactions later. One study measured the body's response during a stressful conversation where some participants were told to hide their feelings. Those who suppressed showed a higher heart rate, more sweating, and a sharper spike in stress hormones. Meanwhile, inside their minds, they reported feeling just as upset as those who let the emotion show. The feeling had not gone away. It had simply been driven underground, where it continued to work on the body and brain. And because it was not being acknowledged, it could not be processed or resolved. It is like trying to hold a buoyant object underwater. You spend constant effort, but the moment your strength slips, it bursts to the surface. If pushing feelings away does not work, what does? Psychological models of emotion regulation often highlight a different path, one that begins before the emotion fully forms. The most widely studied strategy is called cognitive reappraisal. Reappraisal means changing how you interpret a situation in order to change what it makes you feel. Imagine the same critical feedback from a manager, but this time you deliberately interpret it differently. Instead of seeing it as a threat or an insult, you might frame it as a piece of information that could help you improve. Or you might remind yourself that the person giving feedback is stressed and perhaps delivering it poorly, that it says something about them too. This mental move does not erase the sting entirely, but it changes the emotion from hot anger to something more manageable, like mild annoyance or concern. Studies using brain imaging and physiological measures show that reappraisal effectively reduces the stress response. When people reappraise their amygdala, a region involved in detecting emotional importance, shows less intense activation. At the same time, areas in the front of the brain that support reasoning and perspective-taking become more engaged. This suggests reappraisal is not about denying reality. It is about engaging with it more fully, seeing more of the picture. Crucially, reappraisal works early in the emotional process, often before the feeling has taken full hold. Suppression, by contrast, tends to jump in late, after the feeling is already blazing. It is like trying to put a lid on a pot that is already boiling, rather than turning down the heat before it reaches a boil. That lid may hold for a while, but the pressure keeps building underneath. There is another key difference. Suppression affects the person doing it, but also the people around them. Research has shown that conversations with someone who is suppressing their emotions feel more awkward and disconnected. The suppressing person may smile and nod, but their body language leaks tiny signals of tension that others pick up on. This can create a sense of unease or mistrust, even when the words sound calm. In one experiment, strangers interacting with a person instructed to hide their emotions reported feeling less rapport and liking. So suppression not only fails to calm the inner storm, it can also damage the very social connections that might help soothe it. Yet, it would be too simple to say that all suppression is bad in every moment. In some high-stakes situations, showing raw emotion can be genuinely dangerous or inappropriate. A surgeon cannot burst into tears mid-operation. A pilot must stay focused during an emergency. Temporary suppression can buy you a necessary minute to get through a critical moment. The trouble begins when temporary suppression becomes the only tool a person knows. And culture matters here too. Some studies find that the negative effects of suppression are less pronounced in cultural environments where emotional restraint is highly valued. This suggests that the meaning you give to hiding an emotion can change its psychological cost. If you see suppression as a respectful act rather than a personal failure, your body might not respond with the same stress. But even then, the underlying principle holds. An unprocessed emotion demands processing eventually. Consider again the woman from the opening scene. Her smile was not a sign of emotional strength. It was a sign that she had learned to equate composure with absence of feeling. She spent the rest of the workday caught in a low hum of tension, rehearsing the criticism while pretending to be fine. She checked with herself repeatedly to ensure no trace of anger leaked out, using up a great deal of mental energy. By the time she got home, her capacity to regulate anything was depleted. That is a known effect. Self-control is a limited resource, and suppression drains it faster than almost any other mental activity. The explosion over the misplaced cup was not a sudden loss of control. It was the predictable end of a day spent holding the lid on a boiling pot. The anger did not come out of nowhere. It came from where she had kept it all day. What if she had chosen a different response in that meeting? Not yelling or crying, but simply taking a deep breath and silently naming what she felt. I am angry and a little scared right now. That act of labeling is itself a form of regulation. Studies show that putting a feeling into words, called affect labeling, reduces the intensity of the emotional response. When you name a feeling, you shift some of the brain's activity from the emotional center to the reflecting center. It is a small pause that keeps feeling from taking over automatically. Then she might have reappraised. This feedback stings, but it gives me something specific to work on, and it is not a judgment of my entire worth. That is the central reversal. What we often mistake for emotional strength is really just emotional concealment. Suppression looks like control from the outside, but inside it is a constant, exhausting struggle against a natural current. True regulation does not fight the current. It acknowledges the emotion, listens to its signal, and chooses a path forward with the emotion as information, not as the driver. This is not a matter of willpower or grit. It is a set of skills that can be practiced and refined. The first step is learning to notice the physical signs early. The tightening chest, the warming face, before the story in your head escalates them. The second step is to give the feeling a simple, accurate label, not a dramatic one. I am frustrated, not I am being destroyed. The third step is to ask, Can I look at this situation differently? Is there an alternative perspective that does not lie, but that reduces the heat? And sometimes the most regulated responses is to do something entirely different, to step away, to move your body, to talk to someone you trust. Regulation is not about staying calm all the time. It is about having more than one option when strong feelings arrive. That flexibility is what distinguishes regulation from both suppression and uncontrolled outbursts. If you could replay that meeting with the knowledge of regulation, what would you notice? You would see a woman feeling the first spark of anger, and instead of swallowing it, she takes a slow, quiet breath. She silently says to herself, "This is anger, and it is understandable because the feedback touches something I care about." She then decides that her best move is not to smile and pretend, but to ask a clarifying question. Could you help me understand the specific part you think I could improve? The anger does not vanish, but it steps back from the center of her mind, making room for curiosity. When she goes home that evening, there is no stored pressure waiting to explode. She might still feel tired, but she can talk about the day without displacing her frustration onto innocent people. This is not a fantasy. It is a realistic shift that many people learn through practice. The difference between suppression and regulation is ultimately the difference between hiding and responding. Suppression tells you that emotions are dangerous invaders that must be locked away. Regulation treats them as signals, sometimes uncomfortable, but always carrying information about what matters to you. Emotions are not problems to be solved by removal. They are experiences to be navigated. The energy that goes into pushing them down is the same energy that could be used to understand them. And understanding, it turns out, is a far more effective pacifier of the inner world than enforced silence.